Good morning, everyone. How many minds were just blown by that last panel? Okay. We have a really diverse panel here of people who work for very different kinds of businesses, different kinds of organizations. And the next few minutes or so, we're going to try to talk about practical applications of data and personalization in real-life businesses, real-life organizations. So I'd like to start by just asking each of the panelists to talk about the role of data and personalization in their own organizations and how it helps support your missions and what you do. You want to start, Lisa?
Sure. I'm Lisa Gilson. I head up marketing for a new startup called Arity. And it's actually a startup that was founded by Allstate. And for me, I use data every single day because Arity is a data analytics company that is focused around the transportation industry. So my history is spent a lot of years in the Allstate marketing group using data and a variety of different things. And then within that role, we actually got moved out to be spun out and to do this data analytics specifically around transportation, because we found that beyond just insurance, we could use this data in a lot of different ways. So I found myself using data from a marketing sense to actually selling data. So it's kind of been an interesting journey over the last 18 months since we launched.
My name is Katie Thede. I'm the CEO of Bright Pink. We're a national nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help save lives from breast and ovarian cancer by empowering women to live proactively at a young age. We also use data every day, and the way that we think about using data has changed pretty significantly. So I think as a nonprofit organization, we've sort of been on the cutting edge of using data for marketing for a long time, for a good many years, and we've leaned into some really creative marketing strategies and have developed a really strong brand by using data really well. And so our reach has been really tremendous. We've had, for a relatively small organization, we've been able to have nearly a million women go through a really amazing digital tool that we created called Assess Your Risk, to give them some information not only about their risk for breast and ovarian cancer, but what they can do to be proactive and working in partnership with a healthcare provider. The way that it's changing is that in addition to now thinking about how we can expand our reach using data, we're now thinking about how we can develop our products better by using data, how we can create more personalized experiences for the constituents that we're aiming to reach, to help really drive them through, what we think of as our funnel of moving women from not only knowledge, but to being proactivity, into then taking really specific personalized actions, because healthcare is changing so significantly and so quickly. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Hi, I'm Dana Stragowski. I run global social media and content marketing for McDonald's. I'm sorry, my voice is a little scratchy today. So data is, embedded in social media marketing. Everything we do every day is driven by insights and data and things. Is my mic on? Okay. Oh, that's better. Hi, okay. I'm Dana. I run global social media and content marketing for McDonald's. So as I was saying, data, it drives everything we do within social media and marketing. The insights that we gather from listening to what our consumers are talking about, to understanding technology that's happening around the world and keeping up with everyday advancements. Campaigns in general and global, it's interesting to see from all the markets how they listen to their consumers and how they look at consumer behavior and use that data and insights to drive certain campaigns. Something specific in France just happened, that they have fries and potatoes that they serve on their menu, and they realize that people get really excited when they find a potato in their fries or a fry in their potatoes. So they created this whole campaign on they're going to mix the two products together. So it actually drove amazing results and guest count and sales. So that's just like a small example of what we do with data every day when it comes to our products.
So each of your businesses communicates with very different audiences. You're commuting often with business decision makers. You're reaching health-minded consumers. Obviously, you're reaching moms, Gen Z, lots of people, lots of different kinds of audiences for McDonald's. How have have personalization techniques changed the expectations of the people you're trying to reach? Do people expect communications, content specifically for them, from organizations like your own? Anyone who wants to take that?
I'll start. I think it was mentioned in maybe the last panel. There definitely is there's a demographic difference. Younger users fully expect that you know who they are. They know that you get coffee every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m., and they expect your phone, your website, even your car to make suggestions. They have a sense of what the data is. They have a real good understanding that data is happening all the time. I've got teenage kids at home, and there's just no question that they fully expect that all of this is connected. Older consumers didn't grow up having a phone in their pocket. I mean, it didn't exist when they were growing up. So there is a very different sense. The word creepy was used, and I kind of hate that word, but they're just not, they're not as used to it. They kind of are surprised by it, and it can be a bad surprise. Whereas I would say younger consumers, absolutely, younger users are fully expecting that you know who they are and what their needs are.
What about in healthcare? Are the dynamics different, or the expectations different for people who maybe were asking to share very personal information about their own health or the health of a loved one?
Yeah, so I think first, I love to learn from other industries. I think one of the best industries that I have ever learned from is the field of e-commerce, because they understand the importance of creating this really frictionless consumer experience in a very, very real way, and are always thinking about sort of that creepy factor as well. I think in healthcare, certainly we have regulations that are a little bit more stringent in terms of how we can really create these personalized experiences for folks because of federal laws like HIPAA, for example. And so when we're thinking about how do we really use personal information to communicate with our constituents to help guide them through that journey and create a more robust personal experience, which they definitely do want. And I'll just agree with Lisa up here that there is this sort of generational change that's happening. The younger generation that we're mostly communicating with in terms of the audience for Bright Pink is definitely more expectant of a really personal experience. So I think as long as we are communicating with our constituents about why it matters for them to give us that personal information, we do have some level of trust with them that we're not going to, inappropriately use that health information, because we're super transparent about, the need to be HIPAA compliant and the value of that. But I think when you don't have some of those regulations, the more proactive you can be in communicating the standards that you're going to hold yourself to, but also that why it matters, and really sharing that back with your customers and constituents is important.
I think to build on what both of you said, also there's that surprise factor that comes into play where you are maybe walking up to, I'm going to use examples, but walking up to a kiosk and they have suggestions on what you've ordered in the past, and it's just right at your fingertips. It makes that consumer experience and journey so much more seamless and frictionless. So maybe you're not, just because you're using your credit card or signing into an account or something like that, they know what you want, they have suggestions. So I think that surprise and understanding of you as a consumer really provides some kind of comfort level as well for a lot of people, whether what kind of generation they are, younger or older, as long as they're opting in when they're actually using their personal information.
So we've never before had as much data accessible to all of our businesses. I think in the last panel we heard the tip of start small, start with simple ideas, simple moves forward. How are you, for people that are just getting started, how do you begin to think about what data matters to us and where we can source it and how we get it? Your business is built on data, but maybe you could talk to start about that. How are you using the data, and how do you choose what you're getting from consumers that's going to be useful to them and to other businesses?
That's a hard one because my business is data and data analytics. I think, it was interesting as we were kind of prepping for this and the idea of personalization. I almost think that's a misnomer. I don't think personalization is the focus. I actually think relevancy is the focus. I think if you have relevant data, it will be personal. So it's not as much that I can address Dana with an email that says, Dana, don't you want to think about this, this, and this? It's more about how can I think about what data is going to be most relevant to her that I can craft my message that's going to get her to pay attention. There is so much information out there. I think it's more of you got kind of like a cacophony of stuff coming at you all the time. So that idea of relevancy is really the most important. And then on the B2B front, one of the, I would say, struggles that we have is that because our whole business is based on data and data analytics, and primarily for a B2B customer, we actually have to fight a bit internally to get data for marketing purposes, because there's lots of really interesting data out there, but we want to extract some snackable ideas that we can use to get the interest of the customers that we're going after.
So Dana, obviously McDonald's is a huge company, lots of different departments, lots of different people who hold data. How do you unlock data that may sit outside of the marketing function or the communication function? And how do you get groups to work together and not just sourcing, but then using the data you have to drive personalization?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure anyone who's worked in a large company understands that a lot of groups work in silos. So you have to work really hard on breaking down those silos and building those relationships and really understanding the other groups and what they're working on, what their priorities are, and then helping speak in their language what your priorities are and how you can kind of collaborate together. Just a specific example we're working on, there's a consumer business insights team that's separate from our team, but we work closely together. And there's a collaborative newsletter we're working on that they're doing research and trying to understand cultural trends that are within our target markets. And I bring the marketing, the brand marketing side and the social and digital activations that our consumers are experiencing. So we're kind of collaborating on this project that we feel will be relevant for all the markets to understand and be able to present to their consumers. So it's really about breaking down those walls and just, I guess, speaking the same language and trying to figure out where you can, collide in a good way.
I would just build on what both of you said a little bit too, that for us, we look first, because we are a relatively small organization, is to see what we do have. And so first looking at the data that you already have and figuring out how you can look at it in a new way and how you can gain some insight in a new way. But also, for us, partnership is incredibly important. And so leaning into those partners, the brand partners that we have, as well as some of the amazing vendor partners that we have in the agency world, to really help us take the data that we already know really, really well, that we've spent some time grappling with, and add additional value to it, both for their customers and our potential constituents, as well as thinking about how we can create some three-way or even four-way partnerships that will be able to not only accelerate our own data insight, but also give some additional value to those partners.
So how far do you think personalization can go? You have people like Keith Weed from Unilever talking about the future of marketing being marketing to segments of one. Is that realistic for businesses, of the size of McDonald's, or working with data sets from Allstate that are sold to lots of different kinds of companies? Just how far can personalization go? Are you really going down to moving toward this level of one-to-one relationships, or is it just breaking down to smaller segments?
I think there's different ways you can get that one-to-one and also smaller segments in different parts of the organization. I would say from a digital element, you can break down those segments more easily where you're understanding the insights of different segments of customers. But when it comes to, again, social media, you can do that one-to-one relationship when you're interacting with people and really understanding them as their personal behaviors and having that engagement with them. So I think there's different ways that you can do that. And there's that balance you need to find where you don't want to be overly communicative and overly bugging them in a way, but you want to make it valuable and relevant to what is going on in their lives.
I would say you definitely can get to one. I think we're seeing that in healthcare for sure. The technology and the landscape is evolving so quickly that within the next several years, we will get to a point where everyone in this room has access to, a full human genome for under $20. That is within eyesight. And so I think for an organization like Bright Pink that's really working to help women be empowered with a personalized plan for prevention, right? Even going beyond personalized medicine as we think of it now to personalized prevention is absolutely possible. And we're, creating plans to help us get there and be able to help women get there more quickly and make sure that that sort of distribution of knowledge and opportunity is equitable. That's a big part of Bright Pink's mission. The other thing I think that we haven't talked about is how we use personalization to create better community and engagement, which is equally important as we drive towards personalization. So the best way I've thought of to describe this is if we get to a place where we can know specifically, like, what is the optimal menu for me as a person to have the happiest, healthiest, longest possible life, what does that do to dinner time, right? Like, what does that do to the community that's built around family dinner? And so I think at Bright Pink, something that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how can we both be driving towards personalization for health, but also creating community through the use of data and really thinking about what that does for engagement opportunities.
Yeah, I would say we have to get to one-to-one. And I actually think we're already going there. If we went back 100 years, the folks in this room and in like-minded organizations, we would all be a door-to-door salesman. And that would be one-to-one selling. And I would say that this community, more than anything, understands that idea because oftentimes you're on the phone with a news reporter trying to sell them on your story. And each conversation you have is different because you know that each one is approaching the idea or the concept of the story in a different way. So you're already using it. I think the opportunity now is that we have so many more tools at our disposal to be able to get them interested in whatever the concept that is being promoted that day.
So the last session, we heard the word creepy come up, and I want to stop on that for a minute. This year in particular, we've all witnessed many companies, first technology companies, but now lots of different kinds of businesses, being talked about a lot in the press and even by their customers about their responsible use of technology. And I'm curious, do you think that, number one, companies are doing enough to be responsible stewards of the data that they're collecting? And secondly, do you think that this use of data and technology and responsibility in this area becomes a reputational driver or detractor for brands? Anybody want to take that?
It's absolutely a reputational driver. If anything has, taught us the whole Cambridge Analytica, and there's more news today about, how it was being used, it is certainly a reputational driver. And it will continue to even be more so, I think, the more consumers understand it. It was interesting, again, I go back to my teenagers, they were less surprised at that news than my parents were. They expected that was going to happen. They just expected it. They're not big users of Facebook, but they're all on Snapchat, which I don't understand, but there you go. That I think puts me in the camp of old. But I do think that there is a divide based on how you've grown up with technology. I think companies that don't pay enough attention to this will get killed in the marketplace. And so transparency is going to be really, really important. I think the lady from Google that was up here last talked about how that transparency is critically important to having a fair and equitable back and forth with an end user. You have to know how your data is being used in order to feel comfortable that it's not being used against you.
Do you think responsibility stops with protection of data and transparency around how that data is used, or do businesses today need to start thinking about how they make societies better through the use of data? I'm curious of your views on that.
I mean, I definitely think we have to be using data as assertively and rigorously for social good as we are for, profit, consumer-driven activities, without a doubt. And I think that's where there's this real opportunity for for-profit companies that are looking to, optimize revenue to also partner with organizations like Bright Pink and so many others who are really able to, add a tremendous amount of value and demonstrate how some of this trade that we're all a part of right now, which is a trade of privacy for convenience, can actually lead to really significant advancements for the personal and for the more global good of society. So for sure, I think that's really important. I think right now there is more of a divide, and I think we're heading into an era where people actually see value for that trade, right? So if they're able to say, I have traded some of my privacy here, I've given more information to McDonald's, for example, but with that, they're also going to take that and partner with some really amazing organizations who are advancing social good in a way that's meaningful to me, and I can tell that that data is connecting up. I think that's really exciting.
I agree with that, but also taking it a step back a little bit, just helping people understand why they need to give this information about themselves and the benefit of it. I think that's really important, and that's a key thing that a lot of companies and technology is missing right now, because when you opt into an app or things like that, it said we're going to share X, Y, and Z, and they have this list of things, and you can, yes, uncheck things, but if there was something that informed consumers and saying, well, if you give your email address, this is what we're doing. If you give your phone number, this is what we're doing. And I know that's a little tedious sounding, but I feel like the understanding and the education can help people better feel more comfortable and then understand what they're getting out of it.
And I would add to that, again, back to the Arity story, we were spun out of Allstate specifically because we had like 35 billion miles worth of driving data through programs that were insurance programs, and we realized that that data could be used for good across the entire transportation industry, where cars are used on average 4% of the time. We spend an enormous amount of money putting cars on the road, and they sit in our driveways or they sit in the parking lots of our workplace. And we've already seen with Uber and Lyft that is going to change. It's going to change pretty dramatically, whether it's through shared rides or shared cars or autonomous vehicles. That's all coming. We still have far too many accidents, and in fact, accidents are going up because we're all more distracted with our phones. So being able to use that data for good was exactly the reason why we spun out of the insurance operations, to be able to use it in more places. That said, we still get feedback from reporters that we are Big Brother because we're watching. And we've kind of grappled with that because, back to Katie's point, we believe that the data that we obtain, which is all obtained with, consumer consent, can be used to really do a lot of good. And, a future world, maybe decades off, when we have autonomous vehicles that can pick up somebody who's blind and get them to an appointment, or someone that really shouldn't be behind the wheel, is a really positive thing. We'd have less cars on the road. We'd all be safer. There'd be less accidents. All of that is real goodness. So to me, I kind of bristle at the Big Brother, or maybe we should spin it and say that Big Brother's a good thing. Like, who doesn't want a Big Brother? I kind of want a Big Brother.
One of the other things I think we're all going to have to be more thoughtful about, we've talked a couple of times today, I've heard many people talk about these terms of service. Like, terms of service are updating and people can opt in and opt out. And we're just all generally doing a really bad job of making that understandable and having people actually understand what they're opting into in a way that makes sense. If we were marketing in that way with like 5 pages of text for people to scroll through, none of us would be successful, right? Like that's something that I think those of us who are going to set ourselves apart in really being able to describe that why it matters are going to figure out how to break down what we're currently seeing as a need to do and we'll start to see as a must do.
So we want to take a couple questions that are coming in from the audience. First one here, how do you hyper-personalize your marketing without compromising brand personality? You wanna take this one?
I mean, just my simple answer would be, as a brand, your tone of voice, your persona shouldn't change across any digital touch points. You should be the same personality, same usage of words. Someone should look at you when you have an advertisement on a billboard, when you serve them an ad on digital, when you talk to them on social media. Everything should sound the same across the board, whether it's a mass message or it's a one-to-one communication. So for me, if you have those building blocks in place in your organization, that shouldn't be an issue.
So if the three of you looked into your crystal ball 5 years from now, how would marketing or communications look different? What are the things maybe we're doing today that we will not be doing in 5 years because of data and personalization? How will our craft change, do you think?
Well, I think we're already seeing these shifts. There's going to be a lot less mass advertising and a lot more content that is used in kind of bite-size or what we call snackable chunks across a variety of different functions. Social's really predominantly changed that already, but it's going to be much more significant in the future. I just don't see, video will very much be in existence, but it won't be the mass advertising on TV and in magazines. That whole model's going to change.